So what if you had the actual operating manual for your own brain? Well, today, that's kind of what we're doing. We're diving into the science of habits, your practical guide to making changes that actually last. Let's get into it.
I mean, it's a question we've all asked ourselves, right? You get super motivated, you start a new gym routine, a healthy diet, you're gonna read more, and then, just a few weeks later, you're right back where you started. It can feel like a total personal failure. But here's the truth. You're not just fighting your own laziness, you're fighting some really powerful, deep-seated wiring in your brain. And what's so fascinating is that our most common beliefs about how habits work, they're mostly just wrong. That whole "it takes 21 days" rule, that actually came from a plastic surgeon back in the 60s observing his patients. It wasn't a real research study. In reality, a new habit can take months to form. And the idea that it's all about willpower? Nope. Science shows that relying on pure grit is one of the least reliable ways to make a change. You see this pattern play out everywhere. You look at studies on weight loss, on gym attendance, and you find the same thing. When there's some kind of program or incentive, yeah, behavior changes. But as soon as that program ends, people often slide right back to their old ways. And that tells us something so crucial. For change to stick, we can't just try harder. We have to understand the deep science of how habits actually work. So here's our game plan. First, we'll look at your brain on autopilot. Then, we'll break down the simple 3-step habit loop. After that, we get into the really practical stuff, toolkits for building good habits and for changing bad ones. And finally, we'll tie it all together and talk about why your habits are so much bigger than you think. All right, first up, your brain on autopilot. I want you to think of your habits as this hidden operating system that's running in the background, handling countless daily actions just to save you mental energy. See, deep inside your brain, there's this region called the basal ganglia, and it is working hard. Its main job is to take routines you do over and over again and basically convert them into automatic behaviors. And this is incredibly efficient. It frees up your conscious mind to focus on new stuff, on creative problems, instead of getting bogged down in the little things, like, how to tie your shoes or drive to work every day. So, how does this automation process actually happen? Well, it all comes down to a really simple but incredibly powerful 3-part cycle, the habit look. This is it, the core of every single habit you have. It starts with a cue, that's the trigger that tells your brain to go into automatic mode. Next up is the routine, which is the behavior itself. And finally, you have the reward, which is that satisfying feeling that tells your brain, hey, that was good. Let's remember this loop for the future. For example, the cue might be that 3 p.m. energy slump at work. The routine is walking to the kitchen to grab a coffee and chat with a coworker. And the reward? That feeling of being refreshed and socially connected. Cue, routine, reward. That cycle right there is the engine driving all of our habits. Okay, so how do we use this knowledge to our advantage? How do we become the architect of our own habits? Let's open up the toolkit and look at 4 simple laws for building good ones. The very first law is to make it obvious. This is all about engineering the cue. A great technique is called habit stacking, where you just piggyback a new habit onto one you already do. So instead of "I will meditate," it's "after I pour my morning coffee, I'll meditate for 1 minute." Your existing habit is the trigger. You can also just design your environment. You want to practice guitar more? Don't hide it in a case. Put it on a stand right in the middle of your living room so you can't miss it. And James Clear just nails it with this quote. The whole point is to stop letting your environment passively dictate your actions and instead to proactively shape your world to trigger the habits you actually want. Second law, make it attractive. Look, we're all motivated by the anticipation of a reward. So a clever trick is to bundle a temptation with a habit you need to do. For example, you only let yourself watch your favorite Netflix show while you're on the exercise bike. You can also lean on social influence. If you want to read more, join a book club. We naturally imitate the habits of people around us, so join a culture where your desired habit is the normal thing to do. The third law is to make it easy. Our brains are naturally drawn to the path of least resistance. So if you want to go to the gym in the morning, lay out your workout clothes the night before. You're reducing the friction, the number of steps between you and doing the thing. And if a habit feels way too big, just shrink it. That's the 2-minute rule. Read before bed becomes read 1 page. The goal isn't to read a book. The goal is to make starting the habit as effortless as possible. And finally, law number 4, make it satisfying. For a habit to really stick, your brain needs to feel an immediate sense of success. The reward can be tiny, like enjoying a really good smoothie right after your workout. Another amazing tool is a simple habit tracker. Just marking a big X on a calendar each day you do your habit gives you this satisfying visual proof of your progress. And you get to a point where you really don't want to break the chain. Okay, so that's building good habits. But what about the other side of the coin, the habits we want to get rid of? For that, we need a different set of tools, not for building something new, but for renovating what's already there. Now, this is probably the most crucial point for bad habits. You can't just eliminate one. It doesn't work. Trying to just stop a behavior cold turkey leaves a vacuum. The cue is still there, the craving for the reward is still there, so if you don't consciously replace the routine, your brain will just go back to the old habit, or find a new, maybe equally bad one to fill that void. And this leads us to what author Charles Duhigg calls the golden rule of habit change. The strategy isn't to fight the cue or to pretend you don't want the reward. Instead, you keep the start and the end of the loop, but you consciously swap out the routine in the middle. Let's make this super concrete. Let's say the cue is that 3 p.m. energy slump. Your old routine is to grab a sugary cookie from the kitchen. The reward you're actually craving isn't the cookie, it's the feeling of renewed energy. So using the golden rule, you keep the cue and the desired reward, but you change the routine. When you feel that slump, instead of grabbing a cookie, you go for a quick 5-minute walk. You still get the reward, you feel refreshed and re-energized, but you got there with a much healthier routine. You can also just flip those 4 laws we talked about on their head. To break a bad habit, make it invisible. Get rid of the cues. If you waste too much time on your phone, leave it in another room when you're trying to work. And make it difficult. Add friction. Want to eat less junk food? Simple. Don't keep it in the house. The harder it is to do the bad thing, the less likely you are to do it. Okay, so finally, let's zoom out and connect all this to something way bigger. Because these tiny changes, these little loops, they don't just change what you do, they can literally change who you are. See, some habits act like multipliers. We call them keystone habits. They're these small foundational changes that somehow create a chain reaction of other positive behaviors. Think about it. Someone who starts exercising regularly, often without even trying, starts to eat better and sleep more soundly. It's not because they planned this massive life overhaul. It's because that one keystone habit created a positive ripple effect through their whole life. This really forces us to rethink what success is all about. We tend to focus on setting big, ambitious goals. But here's the thing. Winners and losers often have the exact same goals. The person who runs a marathon and the person who doesn't, they both have the goal of running a marathon. The real difference isn't the goal. It's the system of small, consistent habits they follow every single day. The systems are what carry you to your goals.
And of course, we have to acknowledge that this whole framework doesn't exist in a vacuum. It is an incredibly powerful tool for individual change, but we also have to remember that systemic barriers, our socioeconomic status, and our mental health all play a huge role in our behavior. This isn't just about individual willpower. Our context and our environment matter immensely.
So we end on a question that brings all of this science right back down to you right now. This isn't about a massive overnight transformation. It's about small, consistent, almost invisible changes. So, looking at everything we've covered, what's the one tiny habit you're going to start tomorrow?